Members, it is already time to start the meeting. We have also formed a quorum. So I call to order the fourth meeting of the Subcommittee on Import and Export General Amendment Regulation 2013. According to the agenda, first of all, I think we should invite the team from the administration to join us.
當局呢就上一次我哋3月10
At the meeting held on the 14th of March, the subcommittee raised a number of issues. Mr. Tommy CHEUNG and Mr. Chung Kwok-pan wrote to the subcommittee. The administration has already given a reply. I think the response arrived last night and it has been tabled. I took a glance of it. For the various questions asked by members, I think the administration has already given a reply to all of them. Administration, would you like to explain the paper to us? We've read it, no need for an explanation, so we can be more efficient. So in relation to the paper, if you have questions, please raise them. First of all, Mr. Hon Kai. Mr. Chairman, I would like to follow up on paragraph 7. I'm sorry, but I think I still have to impose a 5-minute rule. Item 7, to provide a full list of the basket of indicators for discontinuation of the amendment regulation. Even if there is a sunset clause, you need a number of criteria, and for you to repeal the regulation, you need to consider some factors. Now, you have given us a list of indicators. You talk about increasing the efficiency of stock replenishment from places outside Hong Kong by reducing the time required. When we talk about indicator, you need to quantify it. Instead of requiring 4 weeks, say, for example, you may want it to be done in 2 weeks' time. And then item B, enhance the capacity for distribution and delivery of goods. Can you be more specific? Instead of just having 5 teams, are you asking for 7 teams to distribute the goods on the part of the suppliers? If you haven't got such quantifiable indicators, it will be difficult for us to judge. Having read the reply, I don't see any resolution on the part of the administration to discontinue the amendment regulation one day. It seems that you want to make it permanent. So do you have any quantifiable indicators for items A to D? So how are you going to, say, for example, deal with item D? Set up services for advance order of powdered formula at retail outlets. Mrs. Lai. Mr. Chairman, about the point having to provide quantifiable indicators. Now for item 7 here, we have got a number of parameters and we have to discuss the matter with suppliers who have experienced a shortage. As to whether the indicators should be quantified, well, I think it will be difficult to have it across the board to be applied to all the suppliers. Different suppliers have different characteristics. The sales volume, the market share would all be different. So in the light of the actual circumstances, we'll try to see how much they have improved. For the last point, item D, it doesn't just involve the suppliers, it also involves the retail outlets. We have already started work in this area. We are talking to the retail sector as to how we can have an ordering system. What we want to achieve is that perhaps not all retail outlets can take part in such a arrangement. Those taking part probably need a computerized recording system in the back office so as to make sure that the replenishment can be done in such a way that customers can place advance orders. So we'll talk to the retail outlets and the suppliers so that we can put in place an advance ordering system. And then for the retail outlets taking part in such a scheme, they will get a label so as to tell the customers that they are part of the scheme. Now for 7D, well, I think the supply chain is a simple one. The baby may be born at a public hospital or private hospital, and then maybe you can get registered, and then you can be part of an ordering system. And then local babies should be given priority when it comes to the placing of orders. Well, if you can do this, it means that local babies will be guaranteed a supply of the powdered formula of the brand of their choice, then we can have some relaxation. So you do have certain factors, but you're not able to convince us. Now, even if one day you want to put in place an order to repeal the regulation, if you haven't got any objective indicators, then it is at most a guesstimate. So maybe in a year's time you'll come back to seek the repealing of the regulation. But how can you convince us that you have already been able to guarantee the supply? Mrs. Lan, take point D. Now, if we can have advance ordering and if it is of a sufficient scale, it means that local parents are able to buy the powdered formula of their choice. I'm sure this will be very much facilitating. Next, Mr. Vincent Fang. Is it my turn? I thought many would like to speak, so I found it a bit surprising. As Mr. Sin has pointed out, if you haven't got any quantifiable indicators, how can we be sure that we are safeguarding the interests of the local babies? We know that the supply chain has a problem. We need to improve the supply chain. The importers, as well as the suppliers and retailers, must be asked to supply more. We've always been talking about such vague ideas. Well, I think it's a simple matter. If you think that there is a gap, well, to be honest, have you ever carried out a survey? Do you have data? Don't just say that it is the objective reality. Maybe you think that there appears to be a shortage. If there is a shortage, what is the magnitude? If we want to resolve the problem, you need to know about the amount of the shortage before you can guarantee that there is a sufficient supply. So do you have the figures? Mrs. Lai. Well, in paragraph 3 of the paper we have provided, we have said that owing to one reason or other, like the age group of the infants and young children as well as the mode of life of parents, parents will choose their own way of feeding their infants and young children. And therefore we are able to provide the estimated figures. As to the degree of shortage, as to whether we can be more specific, well, in paragraph 1 or item 1, we have set out the facts telling us that indeed there was a shortage prior to the Chinese New Year. Yes, indeed, we know that it existed, but do we have figures? I think you're still not able to tell us about the figures. You say that you can't distinguish between formula 1, 2, 3, or 4, but at least to give us an aggregate figure. 500,000, 1 million, or 8 million cans that are being required. Mrs. Lai, I don't know whether the figures can help. Sure. Mrs. Lai, can you give us the figures? Mr. Chairman, on the basis of what I have explained, if you want us to be accurate in giving a specific figure, it will be difficult. Say, for example, for the number of live births, I think we all know about that figure. And we need to consider the motive behind the regulation. We want to solve the problem of shortage. If we want to understand whether the shortage still exists, then we need to look at the basket of factors that we have set out in the paper. Mr. Chairman, I don't think it is of much use. I think it's easy to get a figure. How come that the administration is so stubborn? The administration is still being vague. The administration is still talking about making sure that local babies are fed. How many babies? Is it 100,000 cans a month? I think it's easy to arrive at the figures. Why is it that the administration is reluctant to provide the figure? Mrs. Lai, of course, we have the number of births in Hong Kong. My understanding is that for babies aged between 0 and 6 months, 1 can be good enough for 1 week's time. I think if you use such a simple formula, then it's easy to arrive at a figure. But then we are talking about the regulation of powdered formula for infants or young children under the age of 36 months. But after 6 months, in fact, the DFH would encourage parents to feed their babies with supplementary feeding. And some babies are also breastfed. Don't beat around the bush. I think last time Dr. Leung Kalau already said that it is most important for those aged below 12 months. So let's protect those that require the powdered formula most. How come that you can't give us a figure? 1 can for 1 week, and then at most 4 cans for a month. 100,000 babies, even assuming that all of them are taking powdered formula. So at most it will be 400,000 cans of powdered formula. It's a very easy calculation. I think Ms. Lau would challenge you. So it's simple arithmetic. It's easy to get the figure.
So all we have to do is to safeguard these 400,000 or 500,000 cans of formula powder, so that we can safeguard the Hong Kong babies of the formula powder. Anything else is just beating around the bush and is not reliable. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the last 2 meetings, I felt that the administration has certain reservations concerning the sunset clause. In their different responses, they said that there will be reviews, and just now we heard a number of questions, and they all surround the issue of indices and figures. Now, what are the criteria? Would this be repealed? The other issue is about timing. How can the administration give a commitment as to the period of review, let's say half a year, so that we can give a very clear signal to the people of Hong Kong and outside that this is a temporary measure? Now, there is another piece of news hot off the press, and that is there is a visitor to Hong Kong which have been taken by the immigration, and that is as there are 2 cans of powdered formula in the luggage. Now it seems that at the front line, it is not clear that there is rice powder formula. Now, these are rice powdered formula and not what we are familiar with, so there seems to be some misunderstanding or unclarity concerning the enforcement. So it seems that the enforcement, as far as we can see, that there are instances where these are not parallel trading, but rather some nebulous or incomprehension of the relevant requirements. Now, even though in the previous meeting, it was explained to us that it's very difficult to be conclusive because we do not know all the circumstances concerning a particular case. But for cases such as this, if it is so easy to attract a retention or detention, how can we put the people's heart at ease? A few questions there. Thank you, Mr. Look, for your questions. First of all, on the review. In the past meetings, we have already said many times that there will be reviews by the government, and if members want a clear criteria for the reviews, we can do so. In terms of timing, what we need to have is experience of peak demand levels, let's say the golden week or the CNY periods, so that we know what the peaks are. So that will be another year. All right. On the other questions, perhaps I will ask my colleague from the Customs and Excise Department to answer the question. Yes. We are talking about powder formula for infants and young children of 36 months or under. As far as the case is concerned, the goods concerned apparently contains milk, and the can is extremely similar to a relevant brand's packaging, and it is intended for infant use, and therefore this falls under the regulated area, and therefore he was investigated and also detained. Perhaps I should explain our follow-up actions. Well, after the stop and inspection, we will follow up with the case, but before we take any further actions, we will ascertain that the goods are indeed the relevant goods that are under regulation. So that is the situation, and so far there has not been any prosecution concerning this case. Mr. Law? So this kind of rice milk powder is not regulated, is it? Well, we have just reviewed the situation with the relevant authorities. For rice milk powder, it is not regulated under this particular ordinance. Mr. Lord, next round, please. Yes, Mr. Choi-chun. No, we haven't come to the clause-by-clause stage. When we do come to this stage, I would think that I should be very worried about the definition of powdered formula, because the definition seems to, prima facie, point to a difference to the interpretation by the Customs and Excise Department, the rice milk formula. But this kind of definition has already led to a lot of inconvenience and confusion, even though you say that there will not be any prosecution, but there's been a lot of inconvenience caused to the traveler, and including all the procedures, etc. This already is a detriment to Hong Kong's reputation as a free port. I will not go into the details, but rather let me talk about the concern of the Hong Kong parents or mothers and babies concerned. We must not extend the regulated goods to anything that contains milk in its composition. Now, what we are trying to combat is parallel trading, but it is not because of any contaminated substance in the formula that we are taking the action. No, it is not because of that. But it seems that in your present interpretation, anything with milk composition or milk ingredients in it would become dangerous goods, and it will have to be regulated goods. And also further, you want to take this as an example, hold it up as an example to combat all goods subject to parallel trading. Now, that seems to be the intent. I would like you to explain your intent. If that is not the intent, why are you extending the scope so widely? Thank you for the questions. When we drafted the ordinance, we realize that we have to be very focused. Exactly as Mr. Chair pointed out, we must not be overly wide in our scope and allow other unintended substances to fall into the scope. And for the supply chain failure, which caused the shortage of formula powder, we have therefore defined it as powdered formula for consumption of infants of 36 months or under, and it appears to be for consumption by a person aged under 36 months and appears to be milk or milk-like substance in powder form to satisfy wholly or partly the nutritional requirement of a person under 36 months. So that is the criteria. And usually for this kind of products, the labeling would be very clear as to that purpose. Now, in the administration's response to our Secretariat's question, you have admitted that the scope would include milk powder or formula powder for the aged. Now, if that is the case, how do we enforce this law? Well, you would say that you can investigate the constitution of the product before you actually bring a case or decide not to bring a case. However, in your definition here, it is that as long as it seems like the formula powder, it would be sufficient. So what you have done really is to, first of all, confuse the legal concepts and also, of course, hurt the Hong Kong's reputation of being a free port. Perhaps I will answer the question, then I will ask my colleague to supplement. In fact, for our definition, appears to be milk or milk-like substance, there are two prongs to it. First of all, factual. Second, from the look of it, of the substance. Now, for the powdered formula, they are in cans. The packaging will have to be in integrity. And also the packaging, on the packaging, it will have to carry wording to say that this is for a nutritional requirement of persons aged under 36 months. I'm sorry, time's up. The next member to ask a question is Mr. Tommy CHEUNG. Mr. Chairman, I would like to follow up my question concerning the seriousness of the shortage of supply. Now, I'm looking at the government response 818/1213-01, and then I follow up with another letter last week. I'd like to know from the government in the first paragraph. Actually, it was very clear in my question. My question was how many outlets, pharmacies, where there are shortage of how many cans and of what brands. And it says here in their response that they have sent personnel to the major retail outlets and to the pharmacies to look at the shortage. Now, what I want to know is how many members of the staff have been deployed to inspect pharmacies and major chain retailers to obtain information on the shortage problem in the market. We want to know the magnitude of the shortage. You claim that there is a shortage and in the supply. But my questions have not been answered in full. And the response goes on to say that there are, according to the suppliers, an approximate of 20,000 local customer calls were received by the supplier around the period. Now, it seems that the administration, the government, is not following up. This is a big deal. You are putting a limit to the export of a substance, in this case, powdered formula. My question is, what proof have you to show that there is indeed a shortage? I'm looking at the response, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry to say I do not see anything to that regard. I would like to know whether the government had not done anything, whether they are just giving us an excuse, but actually they have not been doing the work. Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, I have a lot to follow up. This is but one of them. Yes, Mrs. Lai. Well, actually, in our response, in the first paragraph, we have outlined the situation concerning the basket of information and facts to show us that there is indeed a shortage in the market. And the special meeting of the LegCo actually had exactly that as a concern among the members. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, of course, we are all very concerned. We are very concerned whether the babies of Hong Kong have the infant formula that they need, and we are concerned whether there are areas in Hong Kong which suffer shortages. Of course, we are concerned.
That's why we called a panel meeting to discuss it. Now, we have an administration coming out saying that there is a very serious shortage in the supply chain. Now that the government has come out to say this, and you're presenting this with this piece of amendment regulation, you should have visited the pharmacies, supermarkets that have a shortage of powdered formula, or it is simply confined to a particular brand or a particular kind of powdered formula, before we can be convinced that there is indeed a scarcity, and so you have to resort to a radical means. Sorry, Mrs. Lai, I don't want to become emotional. It seems that you may think that I'm getting personal, but in fact this is not. If you can't give me an answer, if you can't convince me, then why don't you just say that you haven't visited the pharmacies? You just have hearsay evidence. Say, for example, suppliers told you that they received 20,000 calls. So I don't want to waste time. Otherwise, I just have to keep raising my hand and ask my question. Mrs. Lai, all the information given in Part 1 is factual. Not that I'm saying that it's not factual. I just want to know whether they've visited the drugstores. Either you have or not. Don't talk about a basket of information. Last time they said that they did, but she didn't give the figures. But last time she promised to give us the figures. But today we haven't got the figures. P.S. If you haven't got it, don't put up a fight. I'm not saying that you were. I was saying that she was. If you haven't, I'm trying to repeat your request. Now he's asking for the figures. Permanent Secretary, is it possible for you to present the figures concerning the inspection? Mr. Chairman, we did send people to the pharmacies and the major chain stores to understand the shortage. At the same time, we have also talked to the representatives from the Hong Kong General Chamber of Pharmacy and major chain retailers. We did send our staff to visit the outlets. Next, Mr. Ho. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree very much that the administration should only move amendments to any regulations when the government is fully justified and fully backed up by the facts and figures. Of course, that's the ideal situation. In this case, I think the administration has exerted a lot of efforts. The administration has made inquiries, but then some suppliers would simply dismiss it with a simple statement that it is a piece of confidential information, and therefore we can't have information to assess the supply. To a certain extent, we have to judge from the phenomenon. In the media, we are told about the parallel trading activities, and it is quite a sort of a sensational sight. And then we've been told that parents have to pay a much higher price for the powdered formula, that can be a piece of evidence. And in fact, all such information may speak louder than the figures. And after the introduction of this amendment regulation, some senior officials have their popularity rating shooting up. So to a certain extent, it shows that this is the case. Yes, I know that it is a reluctantly adopted initiative. So we're buying time by imposing the milk ban. So I hope that you have other measures in place. In fact, Mr. Vincent Fang, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok have talked about improving the arrangements. Before the administration can get a better solution to have an adequate supply, I think we need to have the ban, and then we can secure the supply. Now, some members have talked about a sunset clause. I have reservation about having a sunset clause. This is because if we have got a sunset clause, it means that the industry may not be too determined to resolve the problem. You need to talk about the duration. You want to talk about when a review will be carried out. I hope the government will handle the matter as well. As Porcher has said, this amendment regulation does pose certain problems, like the word appears to be. And the customs officers may not have the benefits of adequate guidelines when it comes to law enforcement. Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are most grateful to the frontline officers of the Customs and Excise. Within a short period of time, they have taken up this very important task of law enforcement. In the course of drafting, we did give full consideration to enforcement difficulties. Now we are talking about boundary crossing points that are very crowded, and we have a whole array of different kinds of powdered formula. We also talked about the law draftsman, trying to find out how we can draft the law so as to reduce the enforcement difficulties. For those that should be brought under regulation, we try our best to tabulate the products together with pictures to facilitate law enforcement. Now, the regulation came into effect on the 1st of March. We have 3 weeks experience of law enforcement. We still have to gather more experience in this regard. Maybe Customs wants to supplement as well. I think Mr. Low has got an excellent idea. Now that someone has been remanded, so would you also have a more relaxed approach, that is, give a warning first so as to reduce the inconvenience caused? Customs. For frontline officers, first of all, they will look at the packaging to see whether it is obviously a case of regulated products. If there is a doubt concerning the product involved, then the officer can refer to the pictures that we have supplied so as to do a matching. If he still has doubts, he can always call our hotline. So this is the help we are providing our frontline officers. Next, Mr. CHUNG Kwok-pan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, I asked for a basket of indicators for the discontinuation of the amendment regulation. The government has quickly come back with a reply. Surprisingly, we only need 4 factors. As soon as the industry can meet the requirements in the 4 areas, then there is a chance that this will be discontinued. A. Increase the efficiency of stock replenishment from places outside Hong Kong by reducing the time required. B. Enhance the capacity for distribution and delivery of goods to improve the supply chain management at retail and wholesale levels and replenish the stock at retail outlets expeditiously. C. Commit additional resources to boost the number of hotlines for taking purchase orders and establish a mechanism for promptly increasing the number of hotlines and staffing level under exceptional circumstances to handle the purchase orders. And D. Examine and set up services for advance order of powdered formula at retail outlets of different regions throughout the territory. Not too much is involved and it's not that difficult to achieve. So my question is, if within a short period of time the industry can meet the requirements, does it mean that the amendment will be repealed? Mrs. Lai, for the basket of indicators, they will help us to assess the supply to see whether the supply has become adequate and stabilized. Therefore, even if this can be met, we have to test it. In other words, during the peak seasons, we'll try to see if it is working, like during the peak seasons at Chinese New Year as well as the Golden Week. So I believe that it will take at least a year's time. Mr. Chung, the Golden Week will soon arrive, and you can tell whether the mechanism has been improved and can measure up to the requirements of the government. I don't think it's that difficult for the suppliers. Of course, the administration will say that even if they can do it, there will be further consideration. So I wonder if there will be another basket of indicators and tell the industry that they have to meet another basket of indicators. If it is indeed the case, why don't you disclose all the indicators to us as well? The indicators have already been disclosed. The last one is the most useful one. If we can set up services for advance order of a sufficiently large scale, it means that local parents can have advance order and buy the powdered formula that they need. I think that's most important. In other words, at any retail outlet, if someone just walks in and can get it, then that's best. Even if they can't, if they can place an order and can get it in 2 or 3 days' time, that it would still be good. Mr. Chung, I think the indicators have to be backed up with figures. So for the figures requested by Mr. Tommy CHEUNG, the administration must give them to us. Otherwise, we say 500,000 and yet the government say 5 million cans. So we need to have a yardstick to measure what is meant by sufficient supply. So we're still dwelling on the same point. P.S. Mr. Chairman, yes, the figures can assist. However, for us to tell whether there is a shortage or not, really we have to look at a basket of factors. In item 1, we have set out the scene, and all the signs tell us that there is a shortage. So one day, if we have to judge whether we need to continue with the regulation, then after the implementation of the measures, we'll see if the phenomenon in part 1 is still in existence, and then we will check whether the indicators in part 7 are met. I think the government can't just have a feeling as to whether there is a shortage. Maybe there is shortage in 1 or 2 single points, and yet there isn't shortage elsewhere. If the government, on the basis of partial shortage, and introduce the amendment regulation, then I think it is illogical, because the government is not relying on reason or rational factors to do the job. Mrs. Lai, certainly in our internal assessment exercise we'll have the figures. Different factors will be taken into account, like the number of the quantity supplied by individual brands, the market share, and whether there are changes in the consumption pattern. And we have got different products within the same brand. So members, you don't need to worry. We will certainly take them into account. But at this stage, if you want us to be specific, and say that we have got an adequate supply for all the brands, perhaps the administration is not in the best position to judge. Mr. Mac, we did carry out a survey for those who visited the districts. If you have talked to the grassroots mothers, then you would know very well as to why they have been pressing the administration to come up with urgent solutions, why they support the ban, why they are telling you that it is so difficult to buy the powdered formula. As I have said, I saw parallel traders almost having a fight with the local mothers because both were queuing up at a retail outlet to buy the powdered formula. They almost resorted to a fight. And then for the drugstores in a market of a remotely located old housing estate, it was still difficult or impossible to get powdered formula. Now, if we talk about fair trading, then I think we need to make sure that even the shops around the corner will also get the stock replenished. I think usually the chain stores find it easy to replenish the stock, but not the drugstores around the corner. Now, parents told me that a year or two ago they joined a Mothers Club, they were able to get the powdered formula, but this is no longer so today. So you need to understand why the local mothers are so anxious about it. If you have been to the district, if you have gone to the community, you know why they are crying out for help. Well, in fact, we aren't just talking about the districts near the boundary. Even Qingyi, Taikushing are suffering from the shortage. I won't favor having a sunset clause, because after all, it is a matter of supply. Well, to be frank, even with the ban, I don't think it can actually help, because for the time being, they have yet to absorb the impact. Now, in the past, they used to carry 10 cans each time. Now they will get 5 persons to carry 2 cans each. So I am still uncertain. So we have to give the administration more time to assess the situation. So for the idea of a sunset clause, I think it takes time to consider the case. Otherwise, suppliers and the major chain stores will consider countermeasures after the sunset clause sets in.
So we need a review, definitely, but when we do that, and when we repeal this amendment regulation, well, we cannot say that this is 3 months from now or 6 months from now. Secondly, I agree with my colleague concerning the definition. The definition has to be clear. As mentioned just now, you really have to have done the inspections before you can speak. For example, in Lo Wu, in Long Ma Chau, where I have been, where there are bans, you can see for mainlanders, for self-use, even when they exit their boundary, that is, come into the Hong Kong area, they already ask the immigration as to how many cans of powdered formula they can bring out of our territory. So what we do not want is confusion for anybody. And also, I think the HAD will have to do something as well. The doctors will have to explain to the new mothers that the babies do not all have to take those 2 brands of powdered formula. We probably need more manpower, staff, to explain and educate the mothers that there are other choices. Otherwise, we will just have a vicious cycle of things happening at the outlets. Think of the situation. The new mothers have to, fight with the mainlanders and other shoppers in order to get formula milk from the pharmacies. Well, I think Ms. Mack gave us a suggestion. It was not a question, Mr. Chairman. All right. Ms. Wong Bik Wan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not altogether happy with the response. There's 12-13-01 document concerning the import and re-export figures for powdered formula. There is none supplied by the administration. There are no figures. Is it because you do not have the figures? But that cannot be. Just provide us with the figures. Now, even if you say there are no such numbers you have, then I would think for imported powdered formula into Hong Kong, the Hong Kong babies would probably be consuming 10%. And 90% of that supply would have gone over the border to the mainland. Now, why are we spending so much time here discussing this issue? It is because we want to avoid the situation where Hong Kong parents cannot buy the powdered formula that they need. All others are not important. Now, having heard the depositions, you have heard that there are basically two models, two brands which are problematic. That is, there is a shortage of supply for those. But on the other hand, you are banning all powdered formula for infants. For other brands which have no problems in their supply chain, they are affected as well by this ban. So can you be more flexible, the government? Can we only regulate the suppliers which have not well managed their supply chain or who were not able to safeguard or ascertain that the Hong Kong parents be able to buy the powdered formula? Can we only ban those brands and limit the number to 2 cans? That is to say, we punish only those brands which do not manage well their supply chain. So we ban only those 2 brands and those 2 models and leave the others alone, because the parents of using the other brands can buy the products. Now, after a period of time, if the supply chain is fine, has been improved, then we can take the ban off these brands. Now, if there are new brands which have a problem with their supply chain, if we find that and there are new brands with that situation, we put them into the ban directly. So that is to say, we have this kind of flexibility. Mrs. Lai, can that be done? Well, thank you, Ms. Wong. Well, in the course of drafting, we have considered this. But when we look at the parallel trading activities, the brands involved can be changed from time to time. Perhaps right now it is these 2 brands, but next month, next week, it can be another brand. So when we draft the legislation, if we list out the brands in shortage and leave the others alone, as you suggested, it may be problematic. Now, as for the brands, perhaps I can ask my colleague to explain that. Yes, from the Trade Department, Mr. Low. Well, in the last meeting, this has already been raised. A member asked a question at the exit point. All the importers, through their forwarders, will have to make a report concerning the goods that are imported and exported. But what Ms. Wong is suggesting is that we also include the brand and the model of the powdered formula into the report. Right now, it is the international customs code and also the weight of the goods which will need to be reported. Well, I remember when I was in business, you also have to have the trademark, yes? Well, Ms. Wong, 5 minutes. Now you have to wait for your second round. Mr. Lower Kwok. Well, after the ban had been issued, in fact, there was a lot of applause, especially their grieved parents. They celebrated. But why are we still spending time here discussing this? It is because we want to safeguard a situation where we do not come up with more problems than we have by legislating. And there have been voices of opposition as well after the initial response. Now, it seems that any product that contains milk content is banned or falls under the amendment regulation. This rice milk formula seems to be exactly a case in point. A lot of people are alarmed, including that person going through the border and your officers. It seems that your officers will have to ask questions and clarify before he can make any enforcement actions. Well, I know of other countries which have very strict bans on fruits, for example, import of fruits. But there is a option for the person going into the territory to abandon the fruit, throw the fruit away at the checkpoint before entry. There is this choice. Now, I would like to know, in terms of enforcement, can we allow that choice so that the visitors going out of Hong Kong can have that choice and avoid any misunderstanding. You know, on the net, there are people in the mainland who say that the carrying of powdered formula outside of Hong Kong into the mainland attracts a worse penalty, a higher penalty than carrying narcotics or drugs. So perhaps we can avoid causing unnecessary penalties or overly onerous penalties to those people who inadvertently bring these cans out of Hong Kong. Now, if I can take up a bit of your time. For cigarettes ban, for example, at the checkpoint, in fact, the excess cigarettes could be thrown away. There was that option given to the people crossing the boundary. So I think that is an excellent point that Mr. Low made. It is not an intentional act, these parallel traders. Some of them were actually have inadvertently fallen into the trap. Perhaps it was just 2 cans or maybe 1 or 2 cans that they're carrying across a border. So let us not penalize them overly harshly. I think I would say, yes, enforcement must follow any legislation, but I think we should also be cognizant of the facts before we actually enforce the law. So we have to be flexible and realistic. Well, Mr. Cheung, concerning this, I think we'll have to go back to the department and we'll have to discuss with the DOJ as well. Now, if we discover that there is an excess amount carried across the border and if we allow them to abandon after we have found the excess carriage, then that may actually undermine the enforcement. Well, perhaps you can provide some videos, etc., at the checkpoints to say that, well, before we find out that there is an excess carriage of these cans, then you can automatically, voluntarily abandon the powdered formula concerned. Well, actually, there are a lot of APIs on the trains, on the transport, and there is sufficient room for these people before they come to the border checkpoint to abandon the powdered formula. Perhaps you can just provide a big bucket for them to throw away the powdered formula. Well, yes, actually, apart from the APIs and broadcasts, well, I've heard them too at Lo Wu. Yes, there are these broadcasts and there is a banner, but if you provide also this big bucket and the banner together with the banner, that would be a last chance offered to them, and that would work. Yes, perhaps the administration can respond to that. Well, you are suggesting that we provide facilities just in front of the boundary checkpoints for them to abandon the powdered formula. Yes, we have considered that, and we can provide that. Yes, Mr. Cheung, yes, we are already doing that. There is this facility. Can you give us a reply, a written reply after this meeting, to the effect that you are doing this or you have done this? Yes, we can do that. Mr. Tommy CHEUNG then. Well, in the last round of answer to my question, you said that you have actually deployed staff, sent staff to the pharmacies, etc. Now you're saying that you have carried out such inspections a few times. I would like to know how many members of staff carrying out how many inspections to how many pharmacies and retailers, please? Well, the administration? Well, we have sent staff to aggrieved regions in Hong Kong to inspect the relevant outlets. Well, we have done so in those relevant few weeks, and we have sent staff out in various rounds of inspection. Well, I don't mind if the government had not done the action. That is fine with me. But what I'm asking is, how many staff members have you deployed, carried out how many rounds of inspection to how many retailers? That's what I'm asking for. Now, the government is saying that there is a serious situation of shortage. I'm asking, are you relying on your ears, just listening to supplied information, or are you using your legs to do inspections? Or how have you been finding out facts about the situation? I'm concerned about the mothers. I'm concerned about the north regions. Tai Kung Shing, I just heard, is another affected area. My grandson actually is in Tai Kung Shing. Well, he's not suffered any shortage. I mean, we are talking about a situation of shortage, and the shortage of powdered formula is a very serious problem. I don't want the government just to rely on their ears, listening to just anybody saying that there is a shortage, and they come up with a amended regulation just on that basis.
Well, in the future, you would have something similar. That is, you would just rely on your ears and not on your own eyes to devise your policies. Mrs. Lai, our colleagues did go to the districts to inspect. This is indeed the fact which I've written down in the paper. I talk about the shortage, and the shortage is depicted in part 1 of our paper. And in fact, at the district level, this was indeed the case. Now, Tommy CHEUNG is saying that he's afraid that the government would also likely resort to a similar regulatory framework for other products. We have always emphasized the importance of such food for infants and young children. According to the survey by the DFH, well, powdered formula is the main source of nutrition for those aged under 6 months if the babies are not on breast milk as well. So it is important for the survival of our next generation. I don't think we should take the matter lightly. Tommy CHEUNG. Don't waste my time. I would make up the shortage for you. No, I think today the PS cannot give you the figures. Can we not ask for it afterwards? Can we not ask for a supplementary paper afterwards? Well, maybe she has to get the figures from the frontline officers. On our part, we do have records of officers paying the visits. As to whether you want us to, as to whether I can go back and get back the figures, I can't be sure. Well, for the motivation of this regulation and the purpose of this regulation, I think we have already set out the picture. Yes, I do appreciate, but at the same time, you have the duty to enable members to understand as much as possible, and we want the specific details. So when you go back, if you can get it, please do so. If not, just tell us that indeed it is not possible to gather the statistical data. I think that's what he is asking for. Mr. CHEUNG wants the figures. If there aren't any figures, just admit that you haven't got the figures. Lightly. Well, I think that's a very good choice of word. She said that in future, the government would not likely resort to a similar measure. But to me, this amendment regulation is a lightly taken decision. We don't want local babies to be deprived of powdered formula. It is a draconian measure. We have reservation about resorting to such a draconian measure to resolve the problem. Now I come to my second question, or rather I should wait for my second time. Thank you, Mr. Vincent Fang. I think we are still dwelling on the figures, but so far we have not been able to get the figures. Can we not ask the Secretary for Food and Health to come? The Permanent Secretary has come for a number of times. We have been, but I don't think that if the PS can't give it, the SFH can give it. They are from the same policy bureau. It is very important to get the figures, Mr. Chairman. We are told that we want to satisfy the needs of the local babies. How can we define what is an adequate supply? So you need to find out about the demand, the current level of supply, as well as the shortage. I think it is just a very sort of sensible request. If you ask them for 10 times, then she would be just like C.Y. Leung and said that he hasn't committed any negligence. I think it's got nothing to do with C.Y. Leung. Well, if you want to arrive at some estimated figures, it's easy to do it. But I don't think the reality can easily be reflected in such a way. Consumers have different preferences, and we need to reflect the market share of individual brands. If you want just some rough figures, yes, we can easily arrive at the rough figures. But then the LegCo is a very serious forum to discuss matters. We have to be sure of the accuracy. We may not be 100% confident that we can present a set of figures and say that this is the basis for our final assessment of the adequacy or not. So we are just being cautious and responsible. If you want some rough estimates, I don't think there is a problem. Mr. Chairman, when I talk about rough estimate, I may as well say that it is a very conservative estimate. I've always been saying that, assuming we have 100,000 babies, 1 can per week, 400,000 cans of powdered formula a month. It is not something plucked from thin air, but it is a rough figure. Don't forget that among the 100,000 babies, many of them are born to mainland parents. Only about 60,000 are local babies. 100,000 already includes babies born to non-local parents, but not all of them need a local supply. Just assuming that all of them, that are all of those born in Hong Kong, have to be fed, and we need to meet the demand, then the most we're talking about would only be 400,000. Now, last time we were told that the import was 40 million kilograms, 40 million cans. No, 40 million kg. So almost 48 million cans. So 400,000 cans a month. Is it not? Yes. So 400,000, 4 million cans. But we only need 400,000. No. 100,000. We have to include those aged 1, 2, and 3, covering Formula 1, 2, 3. So 300,000 babies. I am still interested in getting a figure. Whether it's 400,000 or 1.2 million, it doesn't matter. As long as we have a figure, then we can, armed with the figure, talk to the suppliers, ask them how they can guarantee the supply in Hong Kong, and then you can safeguard the supply. Now, for the basket of indicators, I think they are very vague. You can't hold them on such figures. Now, we have to talk to the suppliers. Please supply 1.2 million cans of milk to the Hong Kong market. And then this is an objective, this is a target that you're working towards. So on top of that, suppliers can have an extra of a million, millions, whatnot. Yes, we want to have more business, but as long as the 100,000 babies have got the powdered formula for their own needs, then it will be fine. So figures will be very important. Now, Mr. Vincent Fang is talking about a reserve level, so we want to be guaranteed that we have got at least this level of supply. We understand Mr. Fang's point. We'll try our best to come up with the figures that can meet the request of Mr. Fang. But then I can only say that on the face of the figures, you can't have the full picture, because prior to Chinese New Year, we had that amount of powdered formula. I think the crux of the matter is why that the powdered formula could not reach the hands of the local parents. Paul Chair, we've always been saying that the administration shouldn't govern according to media stories. As Ms. Mack has said, if we just follow the sentiments, then we should have universal suffrage well from the beginning. This is because we have to be rational and we have to rely on the figures. Just now, some members, like Helena Wong, said for the two that were not having an orderly arrangement, not abiding by the rules, only the two of them should be penalized. I think we've forgotten that there is competition. Now, if we want to deal with the temporary scarcity and scare, I think it's easy to deal with it. When it comes to legislation, we need to be clear about our targets. Otherwise, we'll be led by the nose. And Hong Kong has been successful because we have got the rule of law and we have got other factors. Mr. Chairman, water flows downwards. If you want to prevent this from happening, you need to have very exceptional circumstances. The same is true in the case of parallel goods. In past and present, you'll never be able to eradicate parallel goods, because whenever there is a price difference, then there will be trade. So we have to be clear about the target of this exercise. If we want to deal a blow to parallel goods getting into Hong Kong, then I can argue differently. If you say that you want to regulate anything, that contains milk, anything that contains toxins, then we have to resort to another approach. Now, if we are only talking about a temporary shortage, then it is a different story. Now, you seem to have the feeling that we are preventing you from getting an ever-increasing popularity rating. I think we need to be careful. Now, the administration is telling us that they looked at the media reports, they read the media reports, they felt that there was a problem. But you haven't got anything which is objective to convince us that there is a continuous shortage of supply. Now, the PS said that she would like to be very cautious because she took the matter seriously. But the legislation itself is something very serious. You can't just base on estimates to introduce legislation which should be taken more seriously. I'm not trying to make life difficult for you, Mrs. Lai. Mr. Chairman, what stands out is that we're using the wrong weapon, we're using the wrong tool, we're using the wrong legislative tool to deal with the matter. Please look at the other articles in the schedule for the Import and Export General Amendment, General Regulation. So in the past, what was the yardstick for you to include the articles in the schedule? I don't think we are talking about like cigarettes that can be abandoned at the boundary crossing. So look at the list of items. They aren't the same. So I think it is not a very logical step for you to include powdered formula in this schedule. And mind you, it is negative vetting, so it is not proper. So please tell us in the past what was the basis for including an item in the schedule, because I think we are talking about the contrabands.
Perhaps comments and trade. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Low. Yes, there are certain products which are regulated. You are probably familiar, Mr. Fang, with textiles goods. There are pesticides. There are some drugs, medical drugs. Or other products that damage the ozone, etc., etc. But, of course, for each of these products which fall into this net would, of course, have their own purposes. For example, they comply with international conventions or practices, or security reasons, for example, ammunition, dynamite, or in the case of pesticides for safety reasons, or pharmaceuticals also for safety reasons. And also there are other products which are really there for compliance of international convention. For example, products that damage the ozone layer. This is for environmental reasons. So each of them would be to satisfy a policy intent or objective. So there is no one overarching objective as such, but for each of the products there is a particular policy objective. And we will have to be very clear about the policy objective before we include any products. And I think the administration had just now explained very clearly the policy objective for this product, that is powdered formula. Mr. James To, first round. Concerning the definition of powdered formula, Mr. Chairman, I'm very confused. Yesterday there was a response from the government saying that for rice milk formula, it says that this definition does not. Well, actually, Mr. To, this question had been raised before. Do you want them to respond to this question again? Yes. Well, even though I was at the SFC in a meeting, but my question is actually deeper than the question asked just now. May I proceed? Yes, please. Well, concerning the definition, in the response, now let me just read from the text. It says here, powder which after being diluted does not present a milk condition. But on the other hand, the Section 3 of the amendment regulation defines powdered formula very clearly as something that appears to be milk or milk-like substance in powder form. But why is there this wording about putting in water, mixing with water? Well, this seems to be new to the definition. It seems that this is very loose. You are putting in anything as you want in defining the in making the definition. It seems that you are not going by any guideline, and you are extending the scope as you wish. You cannot do so. It says here very clearly what appears to be milk or milk-like substance in powder form. And this is, of course, before you add water. I'm sure after adding water, it cannot be in this form anymore. And you can't, of course, just put in the water, mix it with water, and see the resultant condition. Well, perhaps I should ask Mr. Chan to answer the question. Well, in our enforcement, actually, we take into account the form at the time of apprehension. So the form would be in milk form or milk-like substance in powder form. And also, the second leg is to satisfy wholly or partly the nutritional requirement of a person aged under 36 months. Well, if that is the case, let's just be clear. I would like to ask the DOJ staff, had this gone through DOJ? Now, it says what appears to be milk or milk-like substance in powder form. That's basically the definition, isn't it? Not anything more than that. Yes, would the law drafter please answer the question? Well, Mr. Chairman, concerning the definition, Ms. Ip, yes, we have talked to the Policy Bureau concerning the policy intention. The policy intent was really was about substance with that formula look, or the powdered look. Well, this is very serious. This cannot go above the head of the relevant intent. Now, I think this wording is very problematic because I do not even know what the definition should be. I'm confused. It says milk or milk-like formula powder. But now you're saying mixing it with water. But what exactly do you mean now? But this is clearly substance in powder form. But you're extending that to mixing it with water. Now, if you want to rectify this definition, do it right now. If you do not rectify and retract this definition, extended definition now, I will follow up with you whole day long today. Mr. Chairman, let me explain the policy intent. It really is to combat parallel trading, and parallel trading is most rampant in milk powder or milk-like or powdered formula for infants. And therefore, we have defined it to be what appears to be milk or milk-like substance in powder form to satisfy wholly or partly the nutritional requirement of a person aged under 36 months. That is the definition. Now, for our customs and excise officers, at the point of enforcement, if there should be any problems, then we will have to go back to the definition of what appears to be milk. That is to say, the officer will look at the labeling on the packaging of the substance to see whether that is indeed falling into the definition. Well, I understand all that, Mr. Chairman. I understand the policy intent, but if that is the case, then it should not include rice milk powder. If that is the case, then you should include into the CSA as to how it does not include the other substances. You cannot just put in more words and extend the definition indefinitely. That just cannot be done. Now, Mr. To, what you're saying is that it has to be clear. The legislation has to be very well defined. Is that right? Because in the past 2 days, there have been a case where rice powder had also been problematic and had been apprehended at the border checkpoint. Exactly. Is the drafting instruction too loose so that those that should not be caught in the net are now caught? Now, can you please consider this and respond to Mr. To to see whether there will be a CSA and whether there will be an amendment? Mr. Chung Kwok-pan. I'm looking at the response. Paragraph 1 there. It says that certain brands, there are shortage of certain brands of powdered formula in shortage and at some retail outlets. Now it also says that these brands will have to meet with the demand of the consumers. Now, if these brands are not available in the market, what then? Mrs. Lai? Now, if that is the case, and for whatever reason the products are no longer available in the market, then that is because of the forces of the market. I'm talking about a situation of a long-term absence from the market, not a short-term shortage in supply. Then the consumer will have to decide whether they'll have to stop using these products or switch to some other products or brands. So what we are saying is that it is because of the problems of certain brands that it has affected the entire market. And the government had found it necessary to legislate because of these certain brands. Now, if there were new brands introduced into the market, attracting new moms to buy these products, thinking that maybe they'll make the baby smarter, what have you, then this legislation will be here permanently, even though there is no more shortage of those relevant brands. Well, Mr. Chairman, what we have been saying is that the supply chain will have to be strengthened so that it can be functional again. Now, if the other brands are not problematic, of course we would want them to continue to be unproblematic, but if any brands become problematic in their supply chain, then we would want the supply chain to be improved so that the products can be delivered to the hands of the consumers concerned. Now, the question was, if there are other brands which are in shortage, will we have to extend this legislation for a longer term? Well, we will have to judge according to the situation then. But we will have to talk to the industry, to the suppliers, and there will be one message and one message only, and that is the supply chain will have to be functional. Mr. To, I'd like to know whether the government will have a CSA on this definition. Will they be able to respond whether they will do the drafting, or will we or I will have to do the drafting? So, Mr. To, well, definitely the definition is too wide-ranging. Well, Mr. Chairman, what exactly is the CSA about, Mr. To, if you can clarify? Well, Mr. Chairman, because I do not know the legislative intent, you are saying that the legislative intent does not include rice powder, but the definition here, it seems, the extended definition seems to include rice powder. So would you please clarify what you want to include and what you do not want to include? And you have to, now exactly because of the rice powder case, you will have to amend the extended definition. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. To is saying that our definition right now includes rice powder. But in fact, our legislative intent, our policy intent, does not include rice powder. Can you point to the clause to say that it does not include rice powder? Well, in fact, I also have the feeling that because there was a case at the immigration checkpoint, that there was a visitor to Hong Kong who was remanded because of carriage of rice powder. And there was a subsequent clarification that rice powder is not included in the definition. And it seems that there is a certain gray area or a nebulous situation in the legislation, especially in the definition. So should there be a amendment to this definition, or would you have a code of practice at the point of enforcement? Well, thank you for the question. I can go back and talk to the relevant departments, but I would want to reiterate at the course of drafting and at this stage, the situation just said should not arise, but if members are of another view, I can definitely go back and talk to the relevant departments concerned.
Well, I want to know whether the DFJ gave you legal advice before you issued the statement, or was it issued without the input from the DFJ? Maybe Mr. Chen can give an answer. Mr. Chairman, when you replied the media's inquiry, we based our reply on the legal opinion from the DFJ. But yesterday you didn't clear it with the DFJ. There was on the basis of previously obtained information. Now, Mrs. Lai, we have had the experience of having 4 AOs under my care, and I know you have been pragmatic. So if it is wrong, say that it is wrong. If it is cast too wide, admit it. Otherwise, we haven't got a rational basis to deal with the matter. Shall I him? I don't think it's a matter of whether we should commend AOs. Each AO has to discharge his or her duty. So it's not time to commend them or to criticize them. And even if you do so, it has to be justified. I've been thrown into chaos, and I don't know whether I should support it or not, having heard what members have said and what the administration has said. Why do we need the regulation? Is it justified? Can we not resort to administrative measures? Is it because the administration is inept and so administrative means doesn't work and so we need legislation? What is the objective? What is the rationale? The Permanent Secretary answered James To's question. She said that she thought, but it's not a matter of what she thinks. Well, we are not giving you endless power, limitless power. Mr. Chairman, will it be the last meeting? Depending on the circumstances. Well, I think they owe us an answer. That is the legislative intention. We want to know about the scope of the coverage. Now, it is a case of negative vetting. We want to cover it, and it seems that it is getting out of hand. Mr. Vincent Fang had only a very humble request. For us to introduce this piece of legislation, we need the information. If you feel that you are justified, you need to present the information to us, prove that there is indeed a shortage, and tell us whether it is a shortage throughout the territory. Now, legislative work is a very serious matter, and I don't think I have been convinced to give my vote to the government. As Mr. James Toh has said, he felt that it was good, but we can't just work on the basis of our sentiments. Mr. Chairman, I have to discharge my duty and do so in a serious manner. So, Mr. Chairman, if you need 2 or 3 more meetings, I don't mind, though we do have a clash of meetings. But I think the administration must answer all the outstanding questions. Don't just say that you haven't got the information. You do have to provide the information so as to convince us that it is necessary, and we want to be sure about the scope of coverage. Now, the customs should not be given a free hand to interpret the law as they wish. Otherwise, it is dereliction of duty on our part. Permanent Secretary, Mr. Chairman, I want to emphasize that I wasn't giving my personal opinion. Instead, we had a number of drafting sessions. We have a number of occasions on which we exchange our views with the DFJ. Ms. Yip from the DFJ. I want to take this opportunity to clarify. What happened yesterday was a very unique case, and for this specific case, we, in the process of drafting, did not give specific legal opinion. In this case, it is about rice cereal. Now, if in the course of enforcement, if it is found that there is a departure from the legislative intention during the time of drafting, we will certainly be taking a second look. So, Mr. Toh, please give us some time to understand the case better. For the press release issued yesterday, we didn't have the chance to read it. Mr. Chairman, I am grateful to this lady. She's Ms. Yip, Senior Government Counsel from the DFJ. Mrs. Lai said that it wasn't her personal opinion. She spoke on behalf of the administration. But I'm afraid that what she was saying was different from what Ms. Yip has said. I can understand it. We can't be perfect from the outset. It may not be perfect, but then it is something serious, and we have to work in a systematic manner. Maybe we can't take care of everything, but we can't allow personal feelings to come into play. Otherwise, we are not practicing the rule of law. That's why the LegCo plays a very important role. And the next one to speak, Mr. Tommy CHEUNG. Having heard the discussion, I have many questions in mind. So is the Liberal Party. Though I must add that we certainly support any measures to secure an adequate supply of powdered formula to our local babies. We do take a very serious view. Having asked my question, I went next door to the education panel meeting. Now, when I came back, in the doorway, I heard a member asking this question. And I thought the PS was talking about delivery and transportation in relation to the supply. Now, that takes me back to my earlier question. At first, I thought maybe other members might have already asked it. Tell me so if others have asked the question. I just want a very simple question to be answered. How much powdered formula has been consumed by our local babies? How much has been diverted out of Hong Kong? during the worst periods, like the Golden Week, the Chinese New Year, we have a problem. But still, how much do we still have in Hong Kong? I think it's easy to find out the answers. I don't think you are really providing any help at all. In fact, it is counterproductive. I think the leaders of the Central People's Government have been saying that we need to be harmonious, we need to have a harmonious relationship between the Hong Kong people and the mainlanders. How can we achieve that in this case? Now, the PS said that the Food Safety and Environmental Hygiene panel had a meeting, but the simple message was that there wasn't a shortage. The problem lied with the suppliers with bundled sale. They would only replenish the stock in 1 week's time. So at that time, we saw that it was a very simple issue. If it is that simple, why should we need legislation? And why are you emphasizing, exaggerating there is a shortage? Indeed, we don't have a shortage. We don't have a serious shortage. We don't have shortage, not to mention serious shortage. Now, for our local commercial operations, I think we need to have a proper supply chain. We shouldn't allow the multinational corporations to impose bundled sales on us. I think you should work in such areas rather than exercising a control on the export of powdered formula out of Hong Kong. I would not ask further questions because in this case, we can see that the government is trying to resort to expediency to raise the popularity rating. Unfortunately, it's the Secretary's popularity rating, not the C's popularity rating. Just now you said that it has got nothing to do with CY Leung, but it has to do with CY Leung. It's CY Leung's platform. And so the policy secretary would do according to his orders, but perhaps someone's popularity rating has accidentally gone up. Now, allow me to switch my question. I would no longer dwell on the serious shortage. I think everybody knows, including the PS. I think it's a matter of some hiccups in the transportation. I think there won't be a problem during the Golden Week because people don't have to go back to the mainland. They don't have to go back to their home county. They don't need to bring with them a few cans of milk. But for Chinese New Year, this happened. So it's a very simple issue. In many countries, of course, the mainland is our motherland. But then in the case of the WTO rules, we know that when there is a price difference, when there is an exchange rate difference, it will be common to see that people will go to another country to buy goods. This happens to the USA, Canada, and Mexico. What did they do? What have they done? Nobody has queued up to ask questions, so a simple reply, please. Mr. Chairman, for the paper we issued last time, we did give examples as to in which countries export controls have been practiced. Mr. Low. Yes, I recall that at your last meeting, according to the WTO's JTT, you wanted to know as to whether there have been any export controls as well as import controls in relation to certain products. Last time we gave certain examples. Say, for example, Hungary, Poland, the Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, wheat powder, among other things, have been subject to a temporary export license control or other sorts of control to prevent a shortage in the domestic market. This is in line with the WTO requirements. So last time we cited certain examples to illustrate that we don't think that our current move is against the WTO rules.
主席，跟進翻
Mr. Paul Chair, if I may pick up the point developed by the members. And then the officer from the Trade and Industry Department talked about whether it would be a breach of the WTO rules. I want to know whether there is a country which is imposing a ban on powdered formula. And then for the existing framework, for the other articles being regulated, we were told that some were introduced for the sake of environmental protection, others for other reasons. But they are supposed to be there forever. It seems that they are not in the same category as powdered formula, which we expect to be taken out again in a few months' time. So please also tell us about the penalty attracted in the case of a breach in relation to other articles. P.S. As to whether countries have imposed an export ban on powdered formula, I haven't got the information off the cuff, but maybe I can go back to do some homework. Mr. Low, maybe he can answer. Mr. Chairman, the member has 3 questions. First of all, whether other countries had also imposed such a ban. For the time being, I haven't got such information. What about Macau? I dare not give an instant reply with absolute certainty. I think Macau is already practicing something like that, but I'm not too sure. But I've been told something like that. Last time I mentioned certain foodstuffs being subject to some export control. Mr. Chair also asked that under the INE ordinance or the INE regulation, for the regulated products, are they being regulated for a short period of time or is it something for the long term? Well, for the list of articles, well, in fact, it has been amended as time passes. In the past, certain articles have been removed from the list, and then some other articles have been added to the list. So, are we talking about being there for a year or two, or would it be something more set in stone, like in this case, the government would not have a sunset clause? Well, we haven't got the statistics as to the maximum period of time during which it remains on the list, like 3 years or 5 years. Well, we really have to judge the actual circumstances to see if we still need the control. As to the third question, penalties. Maybe I would defer to the Permanent Secretary.
Are you saying that it is too harsh? Well, for the ordinance, for any substance which contravene the ordinance, well, what are the penalties? For powdered formula, it attracts a $1,000 fine. But for other products such as toxic substances, for example, some other products that you have mentioned, what is the treatment for those? Would there be a very big discrepancy in terms of the penalty? Now, the penalty or the fine here is $1,000. Would the other products attract, let's say, a maximum of $500,000? I do not know. And what are those? Now, in the past, powdered formula was not in the schedule. There were other products. If there were any offenses, what was the fine? What was the penalty? That is for substances contravening the environment or other security and other intents. Would the Commerce and Trade have information? Well, the court will make a judgment according to each of the cases concerning the nature of the case and on the seriousness of the case. We understand that. Would you please? Yes, Mr. Low. Well, I do not have comprehensive information, but on powdered formula, perhaps Customs can help me out here, but I would think that the fine would be within $1,000 to a few $1,000s for powdered formula. No, that is not the question. Mr. Chair is asking for the highest fine or penalty as meted out by the court for other substances, and for powdered formula, he wants to make a comparison. Well, I do not have the overall information, but from memory, for other regulated substances such as strategic munitions and textiles, it can be a few $1,000s in fines, depending on the case. Can you perhaps make the research, do the research, and provide the information? Yes, we should be able to do that after the meeting. Yes. I'm sure you will have the records. Yes, do provide that information. Yes, Mr. Shaklai-him? Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. In the enforcement of the law, we have to be cognizant not only about the regulation itself, but also of the circumstance. But for the customs officer to, at every turn, exercise some flexibility or discretion, it is problematic. I'm sure the officers at the front line do not want that either. Now I'm looking at 4A, 2 years imprisonment and $500,000. Is that not overly harsh? I'm very happy that we have the division of power, that the courts are independent. Well, $500,000 seems to be you are trying to discourage such actions. I understand that. But on the other hand, is this right? Should there be a proportionality? Should this principle not be respected? Does it merit such grave penalties? Mrs. Lai. Yes, when we were drafting the regulation, we definitely went into very serious discussions. We want to discourage organized offenses. We know that there are organized crime, that is, there are syndicates which carry out this kind of parallel trading in an organized manner, and we want to discourage this kind of offenses. And for the individuals, if there are an amount over the prescribed powdered formula, then the penalty or the fine would just be a few $100s or $1,000. Well, it doesn't say in the legislation, it doesn't mention these syndicates, quote unquote. I think we have to be very clear as to, we are definitely not a rubber stamping organization. We have to be very clear in our laws. There is a lot of confusion. It seems that the people who buy a couple of cans of milk powder are afraid that they will have to be thrown into prison for 2 years. These may be tourists. I think 4A should not be so wide-ranging. I do not support this. We must not give the government a free hand in this. If this is in the amendment regulation, I would not support it. I think we need a few more meetings. Yes, of course we'll have more meetings. We have not gone to clause by clause yet. Mr. Fong Kong? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, in the next meeting, I hope Mrs. Lai will give us at least some figures, ballpark figures at least, for our information. Yes, but if they are overly ballpark, then you may be criticized again. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm basically asking for some rough figures so that we at least have some information. Mr. Chairman, yes, for every suggestion and opinion expressed by the members, we very carefully and seriously treat them. And we will provide information concerning and figures concerning the situation with all the background information. Mr. Chairman, are you giving me one more minute? No, there's a follow-up question. No, Mr. Chairman, how much more time do I have? 5 minutes just now was the time allowed, but you're giving me only 30 seconds. But because I need to allow time, Mr. time. Well, but I have more to say. You cannot give my time away to somebody else. Now, you talked about the Golden Week. You say that may be a peak time, the CNY as well. Can you give us some information about the past CNY periods and the Golden Week period? Would the consumption or the purchases be 30% more or 20% more or what? You mentioned just now also that you will have to test the situation and go through at least 1 year to look at the peak demand periods to see whether the supply is sufficient. My question is, in the past, how much more consumption is there or purchases had there been during the CNY and Golden Week? Yes, Mrs. Lai, have you been able to get such information from the suppliers and the retailers? Mr. Chairman, I have to emphasize that this supply of powdered formula is a market behavior. They do not have any responsibility of providing such data and numbers to the government. Members asked for data, and we are in a very difficult position because this is not the role of the government. We can look at the number of babies born, the birth rate, and we can do some estimates concerning the demand. And also, we can also look at the tourists or visitors from the mainland. But at the end of the day, whether this will point to a very accurate projection, we do not know. I mean, these are some of the limitations that we are looking at. That is the reason why, for the data that we come to the LegCo with, there are these limitations. On the 20th of March 2013, there was a motion proposed concerning the clause-by-clause session for the meeting to be postponed to 17th of April. Now, I have to end this meeting at 12:45, extending the scrutiny period to April 17th. So we will have to, before the coming to terms of the motion, which is on the 10th of April, we will have to go to the House Committee. And we will have to do a verbal report to the House Committee by the 22nd of March. I'm obliged to do that. But since we have not gone through clause-by-clause examination, I hope in the next meeting we will be able to do so that we can complete the work. And therefore, On the Monday, 25th of March, 2:30 p.m., we will have the next meeting, that is the 5th meeting. That is Monday, 25th of March, 2:30 p.m. Can we have that meeting then? Yes? Thank you. So the next meeting will be on the Monday of the 25th of March, 2:30 p.m. What about the 17th of April? What is that date? The 17th of April, we are extending the amendment regulation discussion to, or the scrutiny of the amendment regulation to the 17th of April. That is an extension only. Thank you very much. End of meeting.